Hello, today we are going to do block 10 of the Sixpenny Memories Sew Along, and it's quite a straightforward block. We're just going to be doing half square triangles and some flying geese. And what you're going to need to start with is the following. So for your background fabric, which I've just chosen a cream with a little star on, you're going to need 2 4-inch squares and 4 3.5-inch by 6.5-inch rectangles. You'll also need a corner block, and I've chosen some black, and you just need 2 4-inch squares for the corner block. Now the other two colours, you could do a grey and a red, you could do whatever colours you like. I've chosen a grey and a green, and for each of these fabrics you're going to need 2 4-inch blocks and 4 4-inch squares and 4 3.5-inch squares. So let's get on with it now. So the first thing you're going to do is we're going to make a half square triangle. So I'm just going to pop you down here so you can see where we're going. And I'm using my trusty Prim marking pencil and the little 6.5 by 6.5 inch ruler. It's 6.5 inches by 1 inches wide. I just find it extremely useful. And you are going to draw a line, it doesn't matter which colour we're going to do, on the back. Let's do the black and the white one so you can see the contrast. You're going to draw a line on the reverse of your square, and I tend to draw it on the light just because I can see it. Okay, now if you weren't confident about your sewing, remember that you could always draw in your 1/4 inch line. And when I say confidence about your sewing, it could be that you're not happy with your seam allowance on your sewing machine, your foot, or it's a good way to test it. Just draw that line in and you could actually sew on those lines. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pop them together. So what you do now is you pop your 2 squares together so they are right sides together, which is the pretty side, are matching each other. And something like this Moda White Star fabric occasionally is quite difficult to see. So just double check, particularly in the wrong light. Pop a pin in either side of the drawn line. And I prefer these Prim flower head pins here. Everything that you see we sell on the Sixpenny Memories website. And don't forget, if you sign up for the newsletter, of course you will get a 15% discount. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to sew either side, let's bring it in close, either side of that drawn centre line, or if you've drawn your sewing lines in, then just simply stitch on those lines. Now you can chain piece all of your half square triangles together. You'll be making a total of, you'll do this twice. You'll do the black and the cream, the corner blocks. You'll need, remember, 2 4-inch squares. So you'll do those 2. And then for the pinwheel blocks, you'll also need another 2. So that's 4 in total for the centre. So I'll bring you back around to here. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to separate this. Now you could either use your rotary cutting mat, you could use your rotary cutter and cut along those lines, or I find it just as quick and easy to use a pair of scissors, and I'm using the Prim Love scissors, which I actually do love because they're like a miniature dressmaking scissor, and they're really sharp right to the ends. When you've got these two, we now need to press this. And I'm going to use my wool pressing mat when I can locate it. Where I've put this, no, just had it before. Anyway, I'll move these out of the way. You're going to use your wool pressing mat, or you could just use a normal pressing mat. And I like my Prim iron. If you're using the wool pressing mat, of course, don't have the iron on too hot. Just knock it down a little bit, whilst the fabric can cope with the heat. I've just seen where it is now. The wool pressing mat just needs to have the heat reduced. So I've set the seam and I've pressed it. Set the seam and I've pressed it towards the dark side. And that's just so the seam allowance will not show through. Okay, so that's done there. And then the next thing to do is to trim these down. Now mathematically, had you wanted to produce a 3.5-inch finished half square triangle, you would have cut your original squares at 3 7/8 of an inch. I don't like cutting 3 7/8 of an inch, I'll be honest with you. So I always prefer to cut the 4-inch. The 3 7/8 doesn't allow any wriggle room with your seam allowance or with your pressing. So it's dead simple to trim it up. all you're going to do is pop the diagonal line on that seam, and you're just going to trim the smallest amount off across there. I'm using the small 8-inch cutting mat, and I'm using the Prim Love rotary cutter, and I've just got my tripod just in the way, so I've just moved that around. Always move your board, never move the fabric. The reason for that is you're going to have less chance of having any distortion. So we're going to cut up that side and across there. Now that's going to yield a perfect 3.5-inch square. And you're going to do that with all of them. So in total, you will make 4 corner blocks, which are the black and the cream in my case. And you're also going to make 4 of the black and the grey, the green and the grey, which is for your pinwheel, or whatever colour you've chosen. Now once you've done those, put them to one side, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the Flying Geese block. Now the Flying Geese block requires, remember, a 3.5 by 6.5-inch rectangle, and we'll need 4 of these. And you'll also need 4 of one colour, which I've chosen the green, and 4 of another colour, and this is the grey that I've chosen here. Now what you'll do now is you will draw a diagonal line on the reverse of all of these 3.5-inch squares. So you've got your 4 green, in my case 3.5-inch squares, and 4 grey 3.5-inch squares, and just draw a diagonal line on the reverse of all of those. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to pop your cream or your background fabric with the right side facing you, and I'm going to take all of the green ones, and I'm going to pop the diagonal line. So as I'm looking at it, the diagonal line travels from the centre down to my bottom left, and I'm going to pop a pin in. And this time you're sewing on the line. Okay, so just pop that into there, like that. And I'm going to sew on this diagonal line. So I'm going to move you back across to the sewing machine. Just knock that angle up. Now this time you can use whatever foot you have. Your universal foot will be absolutely perfect for this, because with your universal foot, you'll have that centre line. And remember, you're sewing on the line. So just stitch down there. And we're going to make a total of 4 of these Flying Geese units, so you could chain piece and do them all at the same time. So can you see I've sewn down that line there? I'll pop the pins out. I'm going to bring you back round to here and just tip you back down again. And this time what we'll do is we will be trimming off the excess. Now traditionally you would have trimmed off both sides and opened that up. But if your seam allowance isn't right, if your stitching isn't perfect, you've lost that background rectangle, so you've lost your shape. So I just find it easier. I lift this one up here. I flip my background fabric underneath. I grab a pair of scissors, or you could use your rotary cutter, and I cut a scant 1/4 inch. If you're not confident, use your rotary cutter. I then flip that back over there, and can you see I've retained the background rectangle. I'm then going to get, and I found it this time, the 12-inch wool pressing mat. I'm going to set that seam. I'm going to flip that triangle back up and just give it a press. Okay. Now the other colour, which is the grey, I'm now going to place right sides together on top of the rectangle. And this time the diagonal line is going from the middle to my bottom right. And you will have an overlap. You need that overlap there. Just get rid of that thread, because that's the point where it'll make a nice point for your triangle, for your Flying Geese. Pop a couple of pins in. And remember, you could be chain piecing this. You'll be making a total of 4 of these. And I just like the pins just because it just keeps it secure. And we're going to take it back to the sewing machine. And once again, we're going to sew on that drawn line. And you're going to make sure as you sew on the drawn line, it's from diagonal to diagonal. Now, if you have a sewing machine that has a laser on it, of course, you could use the laser on the sewing machine instead of drawing a line, which is ideal. But if you don't have that laser on, then I really truly think that you should draw the lines, because it's very hard to eyeball a straight line. Well, it's very hard for me anyway to sew a straight line. So I'm bringing it back to here, and I'm doing exactly the same. I'm taking the pins out. I'm flipping this fabric up, so the background fabric is flipped behind me. And then I'm just going to get the scissors and I'm just going to cut a scant 1/4 inch. I'm going to lay it down to here, set the seam, and once again, flip that back. And I've got the Flying Geese unit, and you're going to make a total of 4 of those. Once you've made those, now, earlier on I made this block, and I made a bit of a Henry's with the pinwheel block. I sewed my pinwheel block together, and I actually discovered that once I'd sewn my pinwheel block together, I hadn't sewn it in the right orientation, and I had to unpick it. So I'm going to really recommend that you do what I do now, which I should have done in the first place, and that is lay your block out. So your 4 corners, which are the dark fabric in my case, you're going to have the dark fabric pointing in. So can you see? And we're going to pop a Flying Geese unit. So there is the first row. The second row is going to be this pinwheel block, and it's just a matter of laying out the block like that. We're going to pop this on the bottom. I've cheated a little bit because I've sewn ahead. 2, 3, 4, I've made extra. We did extra there for the samples. So can you see? You have got row 1, which is a corner square, your Flying Geese unit and a corner square. The bottom row is exactly the same, the corner square, the Flying Geese unit and the corner square. And the middle row is the pinwheel block. And the idea is that whatever colour on your Flying Geese block here, it matches. Can you see this shape, this sort of kite shape that's coming? And that's the shape we want. And what I did earlier on is I had them the wrong way round. I don't know why I didn't do as I say rather than, as I do. Sometimes I think I'm going to do things because I can cut corners, and you know what it is? I've had to unpick them and do them again. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip this square onto this one here. And at this point, because again, I don't trust myself, I'm going to pop a pin in there so I know that's the side I'm going to sew on, because time and time again, I've also managed to get them to the sewing machine and I've turned them around and sewn the wrong edge. And do you know what it is? Unpicking is just so tedious. So I'm going to pop that into there like that, and we'll take it to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch down that side. And I know which side it is because I've popped my pins in. And I just find that even after all these years of sewing, I've just got this mental block sometimes with getting things orientated. Some people are really good and are able to see no problem at all and can work it out when they get it to the sewing machine. I'm afraid I'm not one of those people. So pop the pins out. Now on this occasion, I'm actually going to press the seams open. There's no rules really about pressing as far as I'm concerned. There are rules, but sometimes I don't always obey the rules. I just want to do what's best for me, and there's a lot of bulk going on in this block, so I just want to get rid of the bulk. I've set the seam. I'm going to open it up, and you can just use a pin just to separate the seams like that. And I'm using the prim iron, and the prim iron's got a lovely little nose on it there, and it just pops up there, and I've got a nice flat seam. Now I can check it with my pinwheel. I know that's right. So then I'm going to bring them back to here. I've already sewn this one together, so you've sewn the two together like that, and now we're going to flip this one onto here. And because I flattened the seams, I mean, you could have the seams going one way and one, the other way. It's entirely up to you. I just thought on this occasion, I'll just flatten the seams, popping a pin in there just to make sure the seams match. I like to pop a pin in the corner and a pin in this corner. So those half square triangles, as you know, are really versatile, and we've just made a pinwheel block so quickly. So I'll take that to there. We'll pop it to the sewing machine. And once again, we're sewing down this long length, and I know which direction I'm going in because I've got the pins there. And things come undone. Now, stitch length, I tend to use a the machine, when it switches on, is 2.5mm. I will either stitch with the 2.5mm stitch length, or I might even reduce that stitch length to 2. Particularly if I'm foundation piecing as well, I'll reduce it even further to 1.5. But as you turn your sewing machine on, your 2.5 or 2 mil stitch length is absolutely adequate. Don't increase it to 3 for when you're piecing. You only need to increase that stitch length when you have got some extra bulk. So if I had some wadding in here, if I had some of the H640 fusible, I would increase the stitch length to 3. Okay, and if you notice, I am sewing over the pins, but they're the nice flat fine pins, so I'm absolutely fine with that. So now I'm going to open this up again. So can you see it's coming together quite nicely? And once again, I'm going to press the seam open. So I'll just open it with my pin, press the seam along, and go across the middle. Just give it that little extra push there, because what we want is not to have a bulky seam. Just pop it across there, and now I can press it. Oops, I've just got that corner there. Just press it from the front. So there's the pinwheel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the pinwheel back into the centre here and just double check that I've got everything in the right place, which is where I went wrong before. I need to make sure I've got these kites coming in with these colours. Now the next thing to do is we're going to flip the middle. So this is the Flying Geese unit onto a pinwheel block. So I'm going to flip that onto there. And this time, can you see where your point is? Can you see that? Where the point is of the rectangle, that needs to be on the seam of the pinwheel block. So I'm going to pop the pin in at that section, and I've come in perfectly, I'm fine. I want it in the centre, I don't want it to be skewy. And I'm going to put a pin in the corner. And because I kept the cream background, I know it's absolutely fine. And I'm going to turn it round. Well, I'll just do it that way. I'll flip it onto there, turn it round, and I'm going to do exactly the same again. I like to check, pop a pin in there. Has it come in the centre? Yes, it has, so I'm happy with that. I mean, technically it should be right, because you've got your measurements absolutely spot on. You've sewn the half square triangles a little bit bigger, and then you have trimmed them down. And you've also, what you've also done is you've sewn your you've kept the background of your Flying Geese blocks. So that was the 6.5 by 3.5. So I'm just going to sew down that side there. And what I'm making sure is that as I'm sewing along, that the stitch line is going through the Flying Geese, you know, where the points met. You have a little intersection there. So can you see the stitching has gone directly into that point there, which will give me a good point on the other side. And I'm sewing on this side here. Again, sewing over the pins, there's no rules. Just don't sew too fast. I'm not saying that you'll never break a needle. That would be a fib. So I'll take the pins out there. Okay, so the pins have come out there. And then what we'll do is we'll grab the pressing mat once again. And don't forget to set the seam. Just tip me down a little bit more. Set the seam. And set this seam here. And again, I'm going to open the seams up, because I've got a lot of bulk going on there. And remember, because I've also put that extra layer of fabric in, when I've trimmed the Flying Geese block down, had you done it the traditional way, you would have one piece of fabric less. But I like to keep it in because I just think, well, it just helps my accuracy, and it's accuracy over that. And I can get round the bulk by doing what I'm doing now and pressing the seams open. So to me, it's all a compromise. It's what you prefer to do. At the end of the day, when you're quilting, and patchworking, it's got to be what you're happy with. It's your hobby. Just enjoy it. Okay. So there you are. We've got that centre bit done. Pop that back in there. Now the top rows and the bottom rows are identical. And all you're going to do is we're going to flip this corner onto here. And pop a pin in so you know the direction. And then this one is going onto here, and you're going to do this. They're identical rows, the top and the bottom one. Take you back over to, oops, take you literally back over to the sewing machine. And we're going to sew down those sides. Now what you could do is you could do all of your pinning of all of your rows and then chain piece, so you're not backwards and forwards in. And this particular block would make a fabulous quilt because there's an illusion going on, particularly if you have striking and bold colours for your pinwheel and for your contrast to your background. Your background will just sort of disappear and fade, and it'll make it look, the star will look as if it's floating. It has a bit of a 3D effect, the bolder the colours are. So this time I'm bringing this back, and yeah, we're just going to set the seam on this one, and once again I'm going to open up that seam just so, just use a pin again. I just find a pin can get in and just flatten it very quickly. Just flatten that, and then do exactly the same on the other side. Remember, set the seam first and you'll not have any problems. And we'll pop there, and that goes along there, oops, like that. So you do that for the top and the bottom. Okay, so now we've got those on like that. Next thing you're going to do is we're going to flip this row onto this part here, and then that row will go onto here. So let's start pinning that one. Let's bring you down. Now you've obviously got a little bit more to deal with, so we'll do the seams first. Get those two seams in together. Get your trusty pins out, pop it through, make sure that you're in there. Do the seams first and then bring the corners. As I say, technically, in theory, it should all fit together anyway, because you have you've measured everything and we've pressed everything. Now the other one here, whilst it's not a seam as such, we want that centre to be on that bit there. So again, I'm popping where the geese meet. Yes, it's in the centre. Then I can pop a pin there, back over, and then I'll do this seam here. Get the seams married up first and then put your extra pins in. Yeah, perfect. And then lastly, do the corners and get the corners in right. And if you want to put some additional pins in along these edges, you can do. So then I'll do this one here. I'll flip it round. We'll do the seams. So that's one seam there. And pop the pin in. It's quite a quick block, and it could be, you could do a lot of chain piecing. It could be a bit like if you're making several blocks, you could do all of the same job at the same time and it'll come together very, very quickly. Pop the centre in. Make sure that my centre is there, which it is. Pop a pin in further down, because I can. Just move that slightly, so I'll just move that up, that's it. And then do the next seam. So can you see I'm just working along the row here, getting all the seams, and you do exactly the same if you were doing a quilt with your blocks. You just work along the row and then pop that one in there. Okay, then we'll take it back to the sewing machine, and we're so nearly done. Back to here, and we're going to sew down these two long edges and with your 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm using an Orifil thread, an Orifil 50 thread. I'm just using the cream. I sell a pack of two. One's a cream and one is a grey. If I'm sewing with light fabrics, I tend to use the creams. If I'm sewing with dark fabrics, I tend to use the grey. The Orifil thread is lint free, so that means you're going to get less dust and gubbins in the, you know, the top part of your machine, which will help from a servicing point of view. And it also beds into your seams really nicely. The cones that we sell, they come in 1300 meters, which is a lot of thread, and they're surprising how long they last as well. They're really good. Just going to sew along there. This last seam here. It's just flipped it up. Oops, it's just, the pin's just pushed it out there, so I'm just going to, that sometimes happens if there's a bit of bulk, so just take it out, take it back, come back, because I want to have a nice straight seam. Just take it across there. That's the joys of sewing with pins. And yes, you heard it clunk there, it hasn't broken it. I'm not sewing fast enough. Just sew it nice and slow. If you feel it's pushing it out of its way, just carry on regardless, as I say. Let's get that up there. Take that across to the end. And remember to keep sewing straight to the very, very end. That's one of the hardest things for anybody to do. Pop your pins out. And then this is all ready to press the seams again. You see it's coming together. So we'll set those seams. And can you see what I mean by there's a lot of fabric here? And just open that seam with a pin. Just pop it open like that. So in effect, you need 3 fabrics for this block, 3 colours plus your background. And if I just refresh you on your requirements list, for your background fabric, you will need a total of 2 4-inch squares and 4 3.5 by 6.5. For your corner blocks, which in this case are the black, you'll need 2 4-inch squares. And for your contrast fabrics, which is your pinwheel and also your Flying Geese blocks, you will need 2 4-inch squares from each one, and also 4 3.5-inch squares from each one. And whilst I'm rushing the pressing here, just take your time pressing. I just want you to see that I'm opening all of the seams here, and I'm just taking the time to get them all right. It's always hard when you're trying to do it very quickly. When you get to that centre bit there, sometimes you need to get a pin in. That's it, it's coming along, lovely. Going along. That's it. The prim iron is really good for this, getting into the seams. All the way along there. And I'm at the end, and then I can flip it over and give it a good press. I'll get rid of some of these stray threads that have come through, and there you have a bit of a puzzle block. It's a bit of an illusion, I think, because what you end up seeing is more of the centre. Can you see how this all disappears and the background's disappeared? So I hope you've enjoyed that. Don't forget to check in on all of the other blocks that we have for the sew along. They're all free, and if you have any, if you require any of the products that we have used during this email, then go to Sixpenny Memories, 6-penny.com. And just, if you're watching the video, would you just like to subscribe to our video, like it, and share it with your friends? And thank you very much. Bye bye.